Hey guys, I am God, and so are you, right? I mean, that would make sense if I would declare that I am God. Right? And where would I actually say that? How can I actually say that? Well, first of all, you have to understand the nature of yourself and the nature of what you're looking at. If you declare something like that, then, I mean, technically speaking, you'd have to look at everything else to make sure that it's basically you. And it's kind of the reason behind it why I started classes. So, and that's why all spiritualists end up becoming teachers because you have to educate people of what they are first in order to make the right decisions and then how they work. So, um, yeah, everything is a three-part being when you look at it really close. If everything's coming from one point, then the way what we're looking at would emulate that, correct? And it does. When you look at anything close enough, it's all expanding from one point. That's why it looks like a toroidal field, where it's coming out from that point and then going back to the center. So it's in three parts, right? It has a structure within the field that's made up of smaller fields that are switching back and forth between positive and negative, and they have to switch back and forth because it's all coming from the center. So it has to, as it's creating, it has to receive. You have to create and receive energy. If you're not receiving, then you're not creating, right? Um, but it also means that the center point has access to the whole thing. So the center point is both creating and receiving. That's why it's so, people talk about how it's so important to work from the heart space. Now, if you can access the center point, then you have access to all the information in the field. Now, if everything is connected at the center point, then you hit every point in time space, or in space time, let's say either we're space time or time space, you just putting the masculine or the feminine first, it really doesn't matter. Right? Time and space, Father Time, Mother Earth, yada yada. Um, then you have access to all of it. And so that's what you access when you're accessing your intuition, or, there's so many reader channels where they've learned how to just provide what they believe you think you need to know, right? And a lot of that, and all of it is based on belief. So there's a belief element, and then there's a intuition element, right? And people have traditionally used tarot cards because tarot cards create a medium to give you some information about your will and your mental state and your emotional state and your overall state of being, your pentacles, what you're providing and receiving in your environment. That's why people use tarot. But under the level that you understand that you're using it also is directly connected to the level of your own understanding and what you are doing, right? If I am just trying to give you information of what I believe you need to know, in a lot of ways I'm projecting an energy. I'm projecting my own state of being onto you, the audience. In my opinion, or my belief, the best way to do it is to provide information from the deepest part of self, right? The deepest level of my understanding, because information moves energy. That's just a part of nature. Without the right information, you're not creating the right structure that's moving the amount of energy. And the best way to do that is to create groups of people that are moving more information as a group, to move more energy and information in the body, to co-create the world that you're living in and access the 0 point. Because the more information that you access, the more energy that you can move. If any of you guys have read, there's a really good book, and other books have talked about it. It's called, Jim Marrs wrote Rise of the Fourth Reich. So it's actually a story of how the Germans rose to power in the 20s. They created think tank groups that became cultist groups that were meditating, and then supposedly contacted higher level beings that gave them technology to create, the weapons, the anti-grav tech that they supposedly developed that kept underground. And then, then you've got all the stories of after World War II where they all moved to Antarctica and South America and diversified all their assets, into 700 different corporations after World War II. And so they understood, and that's why they sought out occult knowledge or hidden knowledge. But all of it is accessed by any one of us because the nature of us, each and every one of us, is exactly the same. That's why Jesus said, see the lilies and how they grow. Even King, what was it? I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but even King Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed such as these. And every plant, when you look at, and especially plants are a very interesting thing, because if you look at trees or anything that's growing, it's always growing from the center point. And it's on the top side, it's transmuting all the toxic energy in its environment to create life, right? It's turning carbon dioxide into oxygen. On the bottom side, it's consuming all the dead matter, its roots, right? Consuming unconscious energy. So that's actually how you grow, right? You're providing more energy and information into your environment that constantly feeds off of the unconscious energy. That's how a plant grows. That's how you grow. And you're doing it in your bottom chakras. You're not doing it in your mind. So if you're feeding on the top side, that's what creates a parasitic attachment, right? When you're feeding here, or here, then it stunts your growth, right? You die early. You don't live as long as there's a 3,000-year-old cedar in northern Idaho. Amazing. If you just sit there and think about it and look at it and think about, how is it that this thing can grow to 3,000 years old? Well, it's not judging where, for one thing, it's planted. It has no judgment of what winds may come or what the weather is or what's going on in its environment. All it's doing is providing oxygen and turning whatever carbon dioxide comes its way into oxygen, and then being open to whatever is being fed on its roots, whatever unconscious energy is there. That tree that I'm talking about sits at the top of a spring that's very old. Amazing place. Sits in the foothills of the Rockies. If you ever have a chance to go to Elk River and go to the giant red cedar there, that geology there is very unique. You're not going to find it. I've never seen it on the map or anywhere else. The way perfect amount of moisture comes into that one spot, and then that one seed that landed there, that 3,000-year-old cedar actually pushed out the other cedars, so other cedars couldn't grow close to it. Amazing area. But if we understand how growth works, then we can continue to grow over time, constantly providing, transmuting any kind of negative, toxic thing. And that's why unconditional love is so powerful, because it accesses the 0 point. You're not negatively attached to something else that's going on in your environment. You're just loving it and accepting it unconditionally, and then accepting whatever comes to you as because it will be, and that's what actually feeds you, the unconscious energy, grounding out unconscious fears or anxiety in your environment. This is the healer. This is how I become the healer, and why Jesus, talked about what he did and why he had to become a teacher, because it doesn't matter how great a healer you become, you understand that your purpose is, and because you're loving your environment, you just want it to grow. And so you want to water it and give it information. If you can give it the right information, then you can make sure that you're helping it grow. And the only way to really do that is access the heart space, because you already have the information. And this is why he taught the way. He called it the way, the truth, and the life, because there's a way, right? You just create and be open to receive and do what you're asked, and then set boundaries for those that don't understand that, right? If you don't understand the process, then you have to walk away from that, right? Yeah, and it's why selling is somewhat of a kind of a black magic, right? Because if you're trying to manipulate the emotional state of somebody else to believe that you have something that they inherently need and sell it, you're not actually providing something in a state of non-reaction and acceptance, right? You want to water a plant. You can't charge a plant money for how much water you give it. It's not something that exists in nature. And so those resistances actually create judgments of the mind. And it creates a judgment to say that this level of growth is more important than this level, which is not true. The truth is, everything has access to an infinite amount of information. And so in order for it to grow correctly, all you're doing is setting boundaries and providing, and then grounding out that unconscious energy, right? Tough one, right? Once you get to a certain level of self-knowledge and understand how things work, and this is actually what's, why the rise of the divine feminine always comes first, where you're listening very intently to your environment. But there's the divine masculine aspect, what you're providing matures over time, and it matures. What we're creating together matures over an amount of time, because if you don't ever balance both and you're just focusing on one aspect, then all you're doing is you're never changing the momentum to get closer to the heart space, if that makes sense, because you're never accessing new information. You're just always accessing old information of what somebody's doing, and that's part of the healer's path, right? If never trying to control, only teaching and supporting and balancing both that feminine and masculine aspect of the body. And so those people just all became healers, and the more profound you become, a more profound healer, the more you can access the 0 point, because if that's where everything comes from, then once you surrender to each other and get to a certain state of understanding, you can create an emotional state and an outcome with your third eye chakra, and then that's what blossoms. Boom, right? But you have to get to a place of surrender and belief. And this is why Jesus taught other aspects, right? When they two and gather in my name. And for the time, he needed them to use his name because he understood that they didn't have their own belief in themselves yet to the state where they understood what he was talking about. So as they witnessed what he was able to do, then they can use that as a reference. So that's why Christianity, in a lot of ways, has some of the most profound histories of healing, right? Where people, I've heard and witnessed other things, in Christian churches where people have grown legs, right? They've done other things. And so if you told somebody a story about somebody that was able to do that, and then you use their name, believing that that's the outcome that you could create, then you're unconsciously creating an outcome based on belief. But it will always be limited to a certain extent, because you're always placing your belief in somebody else's ability to do it, not understanding that your own belief is what's actually creating the outcome. That's the last kind of psychological barrier to understanding what's actually happening there, right? And if you can make people understand that, that's when we have the sons of God, right? The children, the big G and little g active in our environment, that's changing the momentum quicker, right? And then the rabbit hole goes as deep as you want it to. When you can access the 0 point in a more profound way, and you're not attached to anything, that's when you can start moving in three-dimensional reality much more profoundly. There's also other teachings there, when it comes to doing what you're asked, right? It's all based on spiritual law. You always want to serve the needs of the surrounding organism. That's what your cells do, right? It's just providing a need. It's never trying to enforce its will on its environment. It's only providing for a need. And so as you're providing for needs, your understanding of what the thing actually needs grows, right? Because you're starting to understand that it needs to become more self-aware. That's what everything really needs. Because evolution and growth is that, right? It's an expansion. So you want to teach how to grow instead of just providing something that you think someone needs with your third eye chakra. And that's what creates the sale thing, right? Because what someone needs is going to change daily and often, which is why, using your intuition, listening is so important. And accessing the 0 point to what someone needs to hear. I was having a conversation with my dad, and just an example, and you guys have probably already gone through this. Like if you're trying to listen, think of something or remember a name or something like that, it just escapes your mind. You cannot remember what it is. First thing you have to do is let go of the need to remember. Forget about it, right? And 99% of the time, and I'm sure you guys have thought about this, when you give up and you stop trying to remember about it and you go do something else, all of a sudden, boom, pops into your mind. Because you let go of the egoic need to know that information. Because you already know everything, right? If you let go of the attachment to feel like you're the one that has to have the need, then you just get the information. It could come from somebody else, right? It could come from anything. All of a sudden you could go to something else and it'll trigger something. Oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. That happens all the time. And so I told him, I said, just forget the idea that you need, because when you can't remember it, especially when you get down there, you'll judge yourself. Oh, I'm being forgetful. My mind's not what it used to be, blah, blah, blah. And then you fall into self-judgment, right? Not remembering the fact that you have access to all of it. And all you have to do is get to that meditative state and just let go of the need to control whether or not you're going to provide, you remember or not. And all of a sudden, boom, it'll just pop in. I don't know how many times I've gotten better at that over the years. Especially in the last 3 or 4 years since, I started. Most of my time is spent in meditation. Yeah. And so, the first thing they really focus on is unconditional love, right? Make sure that you're loving everybody unconditionally and not trying to control them in any way to meet the needs that you think you have, because the needs that you think you have are usually not the needs that you actually have. And this is what ends up getting you to a place where you need less and less and less. Because the less you need, and the more fulfilled you can feel just by that state of being and unconditional love for the people around you, and pouring your love into the community, and regardless of what it's doing to itself, because it's you're in conflict, and this is part of being God, right? Because if you're in conflict with growth and you're trying to provide something that it doesn't need, then technically you're in conflict with yourself. So that's a hard one to master, right? Once you understand that one. And it's why, Alan Watt and other people have said, there are a lot of spiritualists will become isolated for a long period of time, because you have to let your heart expand again. It takes a long time for your heart to expand when you see how everybody is unconsciously judging each other for what they don't know. And the truth is that we don't want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. Why would I want to know? Or why would I want to try and sell knowledge? Because if I try to sell knowledge, then I'm not giving you the tools to access all the knowledge that you already have, right? So it becomes an energy healing thing where you can, the long-term, result of becoming an elder of the village is just become a teacher and a healer, because you have to teach people that you have all the tools within you to create and receive anything you can imagine. But you just have to learn to access that 0 point, and it can take quite a while. You have to unlearn all the things that we were taught, right? That knowledge is power, and it is in a way, and it always will be, because the more knowledge you can move in the system, the more control you have, the more connected you are to it, controlling yourself, right? Yeah. I went to lunch with my cousin Barbara today. I had a really good time, and if I would have been in a position where I said, "Well, I'm busy on Monday. Sorry, I just I'll try to find a way." I've gotten to where, and it takes a while, and it takes a long while for you to ground out negative things in your mind, especially when it comes to when you get to a certain level, and you just be overcome with sadness. I've talked to a lot of people that are just overwhelmingly sad right now because there's people dying, things are happening in their environment, and it's hard to let stuff go. It's part of growing, right? Letting go of controlling what happens, and being able to get to a place where you can control yourself more profoundly. It's a hard thing. But it was nice to spend time with family. And I would never, when somebody reaches out and asks for something or says that I need to do something, it's like, well, that's what I need to do right now. It's best not to have any preconceived ideas of what you should or shouldn't be doing. I just was, somebody put a great post on there, we're not really spending healthy time as a society anymore, because everybody has their own to-do lists. We have these preconceived notions of what we think we need to do. And then when somebody shows up to want to spend time with you, it's like, well, no, I have to go to work tomorrow, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. Well, do you? If you have access, and you are small g and big G, right? You're small g and big G. If you're instantaneously connected to everything in space-time, you just can't access big G unless you come to an understanding where big G lives, right? And then to embody that, it's a pretty long journey. Learn to shut this thing off, because this thing will try and tell you that, oh, I need to do this or I need to do that, when the reality is you need to get to a place of rest internally at all times of the day and night, so that you can channel what big G has to say. Yeah, it's pretty tough. But she was talking about that, where she's a psychologist. I love her posts. She's so goofy, because yeah, she's great. Anyway, and she spoke about this, right? How hard it is to connect with people anymore, because there's so much stress in the mind. And so I commented, I was like, yeah, we're all creating these to-do lists. And if we didn't go with this, we have created a society of to-do lists. And so we don't generally have any time to talk to one another, spend quality time listening and just creating what we want to create together. That's what heaven on earth is, right? Is when you finally get to a place of acceptance and love, and then faith. Faith is the hidden component, because if nobody has faith that they can create together, then you're not gonna, right? You have to temper yourself over time and let the body rest and realize and understand that you are creating your own reality. That's why there's been so many people that work on manifestation. What are you manifesting? But the problem is if you're trying to manifest for yourself, you're not trying to meet the needs of the people around you, you're still creating an imbalance. And you can temporarily, absolutely, manifest certain things for yourself. But if you're doing it in an imbalanced way, right? And so what I've learned over the last 3 years is I always get what I need. And a lot of times it's really subtle. Like when I was diving in Nusa Lembongan, I remember having this conversation the day before the last day that we went diving. It was the second day of the dive class. And we were talking about what they had and hadn't seen in the water. And after I left the dive class, I thought about this. And then I let it go. I was like, well, man, it would be really cool to see something that nobody'd seen before and get really excited. Like, yeah. And then I let it go. I just thought about that, and felt the emotional state of what it would be like to feel that, right? And then the next day we went diving and we saw a whale shark. Swam right over our heads. And you can see it on my YouTube channel. I put it in one of the videos. I think it was the video after the snorkeling video. And then it turned around and then swam parallel in the water right next to me and my dive instructor. And he was looking at it, and he looks back at me. He's just like, ugh. I'm like mind blown. He'd never seen a whale shark in the water. And it's really, I mean, they're common in the water there, but I mean, the odds that you're going to see one just because your dive only lasts 30 minutes, and if you're just doing a drift dive, the odds that you're going to drift right next to a whale shark are pretty low. He'd been on 400 dives and never seen one. And it swam right next to us. Huge whale shark. Big 10-meter shark. It was cool. It really was cool. A 30-foot long shark. Swimming really slow in the water. And then I thought about it after that happened, and I realized, just like, I guess I put that intent out there and then let it go. And then it happened. Right? And then it was something that happened for all of us, right? Because, I mean, I would rather have a shared experience. For me, I could say, I need to manifest this for me, but it doesn't mean anything if you can't share it with somebody. Right? That's why, we want to create music together. We want to share our music with one another. And growing takes time, and learning all those things take time. And so you have to learn patience with yourself, understanding how to not constantly fall into negative self-doubt and all those things, right? So, yeah. Love and faith. And the greatest above all those things is love. And then you want to treat people the same way that you want to be treated, because they're just the same as you. Right? We're always talking to ourselves. I'm talking to myself now. I think I said this in my last video. Yeah. And relationships can be tough, right? Because the more you understand that, and the more love that you have for everybody, the more hell you're going to put through somebody who may be your potential love interest, right? Because, you're getting into a relationship with somebody that's not at the same state of awareness cause an unequal balance in energy exchange. It just always does, right? So, and so by putting yourself through hell to get to the higher states of heaven, you're going to put through somebody else through hell, right? I mean, there's just no way around it. It's a relationship with yourself. I thought about this a lot. When I was younger, I didn't get in that many relationships because I had a lot of self-doubt and not that confident. And then I would just say yes to everybody that I came across my path. And then I learned that was a really bad idea, right? You end up going through karmic cycles that you have to pay for because, for one thing, you're just not self-aware and your discernment's not in the right spot. You think that the needs that you have are not the needs that you actually have. Yeah. So, but relationships can be fruitful if you ground it in unconditional love and patience with one another, and not try to control another person's actions and let them do what they need to do for themselves. And it becomes very difficult, especially when you're a teacher and you grow to love everybody around you. You don't want somebody to be in a state of jealousy for who you talk to or don't talk to. It's tough, right? Yeah. Just some things to think about. How you are God, big G and little g, and your level of self-awareness will always be expanding forever. It's the most wonderful thing when you really think about it. You're never really getting anywhere. You're always staying in the exact same spot. You're just accessing more of yourself over time forever. Yeah. But if you understand how to get in that state, see the lilies of the field and how they grow. And so you'll always get what you need to know when you need it. And you'll always get what you need from your external environment when you're needed as well. And it'll be the best thing for you. And you'll realize that sometimes you needed to be in places where maybe you didn't want to go, but those people needed what you had to offer more than you needed to be somewhere else. Right? So, love you guys. Have a beautiful day. And I'll catch you on the next one. I really wanted to make this video. I've been thinking about it for a couple days. And I made a video before this one. And obviously it wasn't supposed to stick on my YouTube channel because I forgot to turn my microphone on again. And so it was just a silent video of me on my YouTube channel that was, it just is what it is. But we're getting closer to starting creating communities of love and faith, right? And that's what we all want, really, because our faith is what actually creates what we want to create in our environment. And our love for one another is what enables us to listen to what what we need to create, balancing both the masculine and feminine portions of our body. So, love you guys. Have a beautiful day, and I'll catch you on the next one.